Portuguese, they say it like H a little bit, so Rio de Janeiro. And to be able to go there, oh, I think you're going to have a great time. You know, I was asking Jack if you're going to be learning any Portuguese or not. He says at least some phrases. So the one you really have to know besides futebol, yeah, you need to know tudo bem, tudo bem. This means, you can use it as a question or as a response. And it's, this means like, is everything good? Right? So, tudo bem. It sounds like you got your nose pinched, kind of. Tudo bem, Mike? Yeah, tudo bem. It's all good. So you'll be saying that within the first day or two. Anyway, in Brazil, tudo bem. Everything is good, even though some things are not so good. And we've got just a short time to spend together here. Let's look at a few things. We want to look at the land, the people, the culture. Brazil is the 5th largest nation in the whole world. So coming from the big country of Canada, we understand what it's like to have lots of diversity in where we live. And so, you know, Dr. Reimer says I'm an expert in Brazil, but I'm not, because, you know, it's like talking about Canada. How many of us have been to Tuktoyaktuk? How many people have been to Newfoundland? Like, we know one area. And where I lived and worked was in this point that sticks out closest to Africa there, Recife. Right on the tropics, a place there that's an impoverished area of Brazil. So the northeast I know well, and down in this area here. But Brazil is an enormous country with all kinds of different land masses. It has one of the largest rail networks in the world. It has incredible, well, the Amazon is the largest river by volume of water in the world. Only the Volga River in Siberia is longer. You can think of Iguazu Falls. I don't know, are you planning to go there? Okay, I mean, it is like the Niagara of South America. And you know what about Brazil? They are hydroelectrically sufficient. In other words, they do not have to import power from anywhere because they have so many water resources and so on. It is the longest country in the world. Isn't that interesting? We've got one of the broadest ones, but in Brazil, going through all different zones of temperature and so on, because it's the longest from north to south. When you think about the biodiversity that there is, the rainforests, the Amazon rainforest is just an unbelievable place to be. Brazil has the greatest biodiversity of plants and animals in terms of a nation on the face of the earth. It's got the most species of monkeys in the world. We talk about how much rain we get here. They get between 7 and 8 feet of rain in a year in the Amazon region. And fully a quarter of the world's rainforests are right there in Brazil. I have to tell you that one of the saddest things about Brazil, or one of the things that is very troubling, is that the Amazon rainforest is being consumed piece by piece, parcel of land by parcel of land, by people who are not able to find land that they can buy in or near major cities, and so some of them go out into the forest and then clear land. But what happens, these are poor people, right? What happens is that rich people who have power or who are able to intimidate, it's almost like the Wild West in a lot of ways. Like, people will come in riding on horses, shooting guns, things like this, and they'll drive people off of the land that they have cleared where they've got small little farms, and then they take those lands from the poorer people who cannot protect themselves, and then the poorer people keep pressing on further into the rainforest and try to clear another piece of land where hopefully they can be left alone and live. When I was living and studying in Brazil, I mean, on the news, one of the more sensational things that came up during my time there was about some villages of poor people in the Amazon region where they had cleared land, planted crops, got the thing kind of going, and then these lawless brigades came in to take over, and they actually had like, what do we call this? to take down the tree. They had chainsaws, and while people were sleeping in their house, they came in and buzzed their home down right around them. Think how terrifying that would be. So, yes, the rainforest is there, and we can see all the pristine beauty and so on, but it's also got its tensions. One thing I want you to know is that in Rio de Janeiro, this place, it's called Corcovado, or Christ the Redeemer, Cristo Redentor. This statue and the area around it is considered one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. And probably you'll have the chance to go up here. It's quite a hike if you don't take a bus. And you look out over, this is Pau de Sucre, this is the Sugarloaf Mountain. You take a tram out there, like an aerial tram, and there's a big sign. They're so proud of the fact that coming back, the ride is free, right? Yeah, like as if, where are you going to go from there? You know, you could never, unless you jump off the cliff. So you pay to go out, it's free coming back. But anyway, what an amazing city, Botafogo Bay, and you've heard about the incredible beaches and so on in Rio. It really true. This is it's a beautiful country. Extraordinary in terms of its position in the world. People in Brazil feel like they are they're on the cusp of the 21st century. They feel that even though they are kind of a medium power in the world today, that they feel that they have the energy, both naturally, the resources naturally, but also the human resources to make a go of great success in the future that comes ahead. So you'll sense a real energy that's there, a palpable kind of energy that runs through the people, feeling that the days that come ahead are hopeful for them, even though I must tell you that there's lots of struggle there. You probably won't be affected so much by the socioeconomic reality of the land, because you'll be attending a special event, and you will be engaging with foreigners a lot. But the socioeconomic reality of Latin America and of South America in particular is a history of inequalities and abuses. How to explain this? South America and North America are totally different. Yes, they are the New World, but in North America, people came from Europe and they intended to settle here, right? They came to find religious freedom and plots of land to make their own and a new life in the wilderness or something like that. We know all about that, and so that's part of our history in Canada, and certainly it's part of the history in the United States, you know, the Puritans arriving and so on. And well, in Latin America was viewed by many Europeans as their backyard, where they could go and pluck things out of the garden and bring home to enjoy or to eat, or where they could go to their backyard and fell a tree or take resources and bring it back home. You know that in Latin America, those from the Iberian Peninsula, so Spaniards and Portuguese, visited in South America, and they divided up the land and took out of it systematically resource after resource after resource. And so, you know, if we had time here, I can tell you the heartbreaking story of what it is like for peoples in the Andean countries, for example, to find that things that were used in ceremonial religious activities but were made of gold were taken or stolen away or forced from them to be taken back to Europe. In Brazil, it was Brazil is named for Brazil wood. This is this incredible, rich timber that is there, but there's not so much of it left anymore. If you want to see Brazil wood, you got to go, you know, to Europe, because that's where all the trees were exported, and this fabulous resource now lines palaces and you name it there. We talk about cash cropping. I just put this little word down in the corner here. What happened in South America is that people came and exploited the land, not intending to live there, not for a long time. Settlement came much later. So Brazil, first of all, it was known for sugar. Sugar, 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 sugar. And so what you do is you plant the land full of sugar cane, and then when the soil can no longer nourish that particular crop, well, you just kick it over, and then you go on to, coffee, let's do coffee. And so cash cropping means you have one crop, and you just exhaust the land until it cannot produce that any longer. But there was no infrastructure to feed back into the land, or to nourish it, or to help it. So now we got all the gold. Now we took away all the Brazil wood. Sugar was exported. Then we get to coffee. And so the land, especially that part that I was telling you about that sticks out close to Africa, because that was the easiest to come to, and they got there first, that area just became almost unarable. It became dry, and the land cracked, and the people that live there today, they look like the land. They're little, tiny, shorter people than the rest of the country, and their faces are all wrinkled up, and you look at some lady and you think, wow, she's like 65, she's 32. You know, she has lived a hard life. The work that I did in Brazil, it fueled my interest for the final degree that I needed to get. And I'm telling you, to work on my dissertation there, I wrote about women of poverty in the northeast of Brazil. It was such a challenging and disturbing and provocative work. I interviewed women. One lady, she had born 22 live children in her life. There were only 2 sets of twins among them. 22 live children. Can you imagine, dear friends? So no wonder people look like they're consumed or their energies are used up. And, you know, a lady's husband like this might be some guy all bent over and, you know, tired from working the land and just... I want you to think of these people as real people, that when you look into people's faces, they all have a story to tell us. And the inequities that have, and the abuses that have happened on the land there have affected the people in terms of their history, and even down to the present day and how people think and work and so on. Of course, people did eventually come and settle in Brazil, but not for a long time. And so it put it into a situation where there was always difficulty in resolving social issues. There's a famous book, I just put it here with its title, Casa Grande y Senzala, but what it means the big house and the slave quarters. Okay? Casa Grande, I think you would get that easy enough. So the big house and the slave quarters. It means that some people lived in privilege and some people were you know, the broad back and brawny arm of the nation, and they suffered so others could live in privilege. So here we got the fancy house, and here we got the little place where, you know, the slaves work and so on. We'll talk more about the people and how this is represented in the culture just in a little bit. But you will see, probably, depending where you stay, are you going to be staying in hotels and so on, or in okay, so maybe for the Olympics it'll be all cleaned up. But what you might see in places, if you're not just right in Rio, but you're somewhere else, you can see it's something we don't have here in North America. There'll be like high-rise buildings, and then there'll be like shanty towns built all around the high-rises, because those are the places of the people who work as servants to the people who live in the fancy buildings. Or, in lots of cases, people will have an apartment maybe in a fancy downtown place, oh, I don't know, Ipanema Beach or something like that, and they'll have one room in their apartment, and that's for the servant to live there. And typically that would be a woman, a young woman of some kind, and so that person may live with the family, but they don't get the same privileges or rights. And typically it's kind of awful, but the young servant person who is there, typically a woman, is also there to initiate the oldest son into sexual experience, so he can, be all trained up and everything by the time he decides to marry or whatever else he's going to do. So there is this idea that there's kind of a throwaway group of people within society. Now, things are changing, and young people are more assertive than they used to be, so it's not just that people just take this and that's, a fait accompli. Things do change over time, but in many people's minds there is still this idea of some kind of differentiation between peoples. The land has been abused, people have been abused. There's a lot of political volatility, and I just want to show you some images here. This is on the border with Bolivia, and these are tin miners, and they're protesting because they're working in dangerous conditions and haven't been heard. This here, it looks pretty peaceable in this photo here, but it's from the BBC World News download, and this is actually a demonstration of people who were demonstrating against the Olympics. And I'm sure you know all about that, because just like here in Canada when we had the Olympics, there was a group that said this is just going to cost us gazillion dollars in tax money and so on. Why do we even want the Olympics here? The same thing is going on in Rio, and the same thing that happened in Vancouver. Will local people get tickets? Or is it just going to be foreigners? Now they're talking about in Rio that they're going to buy tickets and give them out free to school children. Who knows if it will happen? But here are people saying, we don't want what the government is offloading on us. And so, poor people are coming to the forefront and agitating for change. Middle class and upper class people, the same. So politics is something people are very in tune with. They will have an opinion on everything. You can learn tons, even if you don't agree with people. If you listen to them, you will learn a lot, and you'll be able to find lots of touchstones for discussion. And certainly, when we talk here about the socioeconomic reality of the country, again, this layering of society comes into being. So there's the Olympic Stadium, and that looks pretty fantastic, ready to go there. But most people live, and here's a word you'll need to know in Portuguese, they live in favelas. Favela is like a ghetto, or it's a neighborhood that has not been planned. And again, around cities grow up shanty towns of different kinds. So here's football in the favela. Some of these places have been there for years and years and years. And when Pope John Paul II, so 2 popes ago, when he came to Brazil, he was astounded by the lack of care that local governments gave to these shanty towns, to the favelas that were there. And he said, these people need pure water, they need electricity, they need schools and stuff, and if you won't do anything about it, local people, he said, and he took off his papal ring, that the Pope, people kneel down, they kiss his ring and so on. Well, he wasn't really going to sell it, but he said, here, take and sell this, and use the money to provide for the people what they need. So in effect, it was like shaming the local people if the Pope is going to sell his ring that's how many centuries old, Of course, they won't allow that, but so they had to then start caring for these places. Sometimes people call them pueblos jóvenes, which means like young towns or new places. But favelas and shanty towns go all the way up hillsides. There is a definite layering in them. Even within the favela, there's a kind of social status. I just contrasted it here with one of the really pretty cities in Brazil. So there's colonial architecture and there's all the history, and that's part of Brazil. But this is too. So the people that have worked their way up to the top of the local status, they live at the top of the hill, because when it rains and all the rain falls down and the mud slides down, the people at the bottom get stuck with the muck. So if you're at the bottom of the hill, you're not as prestigious as somebody at the top. There has been this social strain upon the society in Brazil so much at the lower echelons that people have engaged in what we would think is almost like superhuman efforts to be able to survive and to make their way forward. This is not a Cecil B. DeMille movie. This is a real thing. And this is an open pit gold mine in the northern part of Brazil. It has been closed now because it became too dangerous. It's even pretty dangerous looking here, called Serra Pelada. And this is equivalent to the gold rush that we would associate with the Klondike and the Yukon people had in Brazil just in the 1990s and into the early 2000s, where some people found gold nuggets without much difficulty and unearthed, and they began to have people come in to work for large companies to mine this gold. It was too difficult to get big equipment in there, so this thing has been dug out by hand. It's unfathomable. And you can see that they have claims that are a few meters square. And so, see, these guys haven't dug down as far as the ones down here. And they had to close this open pit mine because they had dug down so far that the water was coming in so much that they couldn't actually get into it anymore. But look at those ladders. From time to time, people climbing on these ladders, going up and down like little ants. The ladders would fall over and people would be killed. And look at the backs of these men here, carrying this stuff out. Because they were down where it was moist, the ground was wet. So it'd be enough to carry a huge sack of sand that's dry on your back. But now just imagine it's sopping wet. The added weight of that to bring it up. And here are people working for pennies a day. They'd bring up the soil and then they'd sort it out and filter it and assay it and see what kind of gold they got there. This is what many people decided was preferable to being without any kind of work at all or living in the conditions that they did. So again, this is from it was from a Time magazine spread, that photo essay that talked about some of the lives of the people there. I mean, just look at the back of this fellow, just caked with mud and with wetness. And you can see some of the groups of people working there. So it expresses both hopefulness and at the same time the hard work ethic of the people, also their opportunistic ventures, hoping for something better, and just the ingenuity perhaps of people to be able to do something like this, such on a large scale, but with such, I don't know, is it primitive or simple means? The people of Brazil are fascinating, and you know, you will be there for how long?
The trip is total 20 days, but in Brazil we're there for 16.
Okay, so let's say 2 weeks and a little bit. It is not unrealistic for you to have a meaningful encounter with at least one person each week. So, like, you're going to meet tons of people, but I mean like somebody that you might actually come back and maintain a friendship with through correspondence, so a Facebook connection or something that would endure. So for 16 days, it's not unreasonable to say there might be two people that you actually could meet and maybe meet again or develop some kind of connection with. I've been with lots of travel study groups, mostly in Central America, but I would say the greatest detriment in how we have done things at Trinity is that we keep our groups together and don't allow people enough time to really interact with local people sufficiently. I would just encourage you, don't do something unsafe, but if the chance comes to talk to one of your friends versus talk to somebody who's local, take the chance to talk to somebody else. Get out of the little comfy, oversized family situation we're in here and actually look to put yourself out there. This is the way to challenge ourselves, to learn something new, to be stimulated, to grow as a person, to gain new perspectives. And the people of Brazil, I think, will enthrall you. Who are they? Well, they're people who are incredibly racially diverse. And this, of course, is typical because of the country in which they come from. It's so very large. But when you think about how Brazil was finally settled and what took place, you know, there were the indigenous peoples there to begin with. I mean, it wasn't a vacuum. People were living there. And so here we got ladies representing an indigenous group. They come from the border along with by Paraguay there. And you can see just how beautiful are their traditional outfits and so on. So the indigenous people, the South American Indian peoples were there. Then, along with the Europeans who came from Spain and Portugal, largely, to Brazil, they brought with them indentured workers, slaves from Africa, to work on the fields and do different things. So there's a whole host of people who are very dark that live in Brazil. But there's also very light-colored people. And one thing that's great about Brazil is people do not make an issue like in North America, trying to sort out if you are white, black, blackish, oriental, or something like that. It's a whole spectrum of people there. And it goes from very light to very dark. We've got the indigenous people, the African people who came to work, the European whites who came, and once the slaves were emancipated and made free, then we had lots and lots of Asian people come to Brazil to work for wages, but do similar work that Africans had done previously. And one of the funnest things I thought when I first went to Brazil was to discover how all these different culture groups worked together and still felt themselves individually honoring their ancestry, but being completely Brazilian. So, for example, the national baseball team of Brazil, I didn't see anybody who didn't look Japanese on that team. And the largest Japanese backgrounded city outside of Japan is actually in southern Brazil. And so here are these guys you just swear they must be from Japan, but they're just doing the samba there. You know how the soccer team in Brazil celebrates when they win and they beat the drums. These guys were doing exactly the same. So culturally, their minds were totally Brazilian, but they had the visage of being people who came from the Orient. I think you would recognize Pele. I put his picture up here, right? Probably one of the greatest football players that's ever lived, and grew up in the slums playing football with a little wad of paper and put around with tape, and learned to do all those incredible tricks that he could do. And when he became rich and famous, he married Xuxa. This is his wife there. And, well, he's had a few, so, okay, it's not the only one. But Xuxa, and she was a model. And see how light she is. So she came from the southern part of the country where German immigrants had been. Pele came from the favelas of the big city. And Pele's famous statement, "Money lightens the skin." So he says that in Brazil, scope is for everyone, and it depends on what you do and how well you do it, but people generally do not make an issue of race the way we seem to in North America here, but you will see it's just a cosmopolitan blend. Oh yeah, there's Neymar if you're up on your Brazilian soccer guys, so even on the team, that you might see playing and so on, there's great diversity there. Brazil is youthful. And so you will find people that not only are they young in age, but they're youthful in attitude. Just kind of a get up and go society, go with the flow. Yes, you might see any number of different things that would remind you that you are in a youth-oriented society. This is a place where you can have tremendous input if you were doing something in sport ministry. As those who are slightly older than the younger generation, you can be a tremendous example to them. You can be a great help in helping people with skills. You go places outdoors. People are lively and active. Here along some of the beaches, Copacabana and Ipanema, those places you'll get to know. part of the youthfulness of the society is that people feel very free about their bodies, and I'm sure you will see what is referred to, let me see how we say in English, it's dental floss bikinis. I mean, to say that a bikini is just, way too much material. So you know how skinny dental floss is. Okay, so that's what you can expect. So I'm not suggesting you go for it, but on the beaches, why is it that the people that always show the most they're kind of wrinkly and old. Some of those ones on the beaches that are the foreigners, but the young Brazilians, they're pretty good looking. So on the beach, you will actually see people playing volleyball with their feet. You've heard about this? I just stood there mesmerized. They have such skill to be able to just no-touch volleyball. Amazing.